Hello and welcome, everyone. Today's session is all about business development specifically for firms. So we're going to start off with some intro ideas and thoughts from Randall Craig and then flip into Q&A on all things biz dev specific for professional service firms. So for those of you who don't yet know Randall Craig, I'll share he has founded several successful startups. He's held a long-time position at a Big Four consulting firm. He was a senior executive at an American public company. He's the author of 8 books, in the Speaker Hall of Fame, master facilitator. He's helped over 100 organizations scale, and he works with me at the Brain Trust Professional Institutes, helping organizations grow their businesses. So Randall, can we start by asking you to share what you see as the key considerations for successful business development for firms?
I think most partners realize and recognize how to grow a firm, and they learned it from their betters when they were earlier in their careers. But in today's session, we do want to explore a little bit more strategically how to go about doing that. Of course, it's different for larger firms versus smaller firms, but the concepts actually are the very same. I think most professionals realize that it's a question of referrals and it's a question of building relationships. But I'm going to suggest that it's perhaps a few other things as well. Also suggest that it's not just a question of relationships, but it's also a question of building thought leadership. In fact, everything boils down to those two things, building relationships and thought leadership. But how do you actually do that? And is there a way to do it more effectively, both at an individual level and actually a firm level as well? So, most firms have got a marketing department, or smaller firms, perhaps an agency that helps. And yeah, the marketing department, certainly when I started in this area, several decades ago, it's progressed dramatically in terms of sophistication, and what we know about professional service firm marketing has changed quite a bit. And yes, the marketing department can focus on the web and social media, and it can focus on events, and it can focus on, well, depending on the firm, advertising or trade shows, and a whole bunch of other marketing initiatives that can blanket and underlie a lot of the efforts that the firm as a whole is doing. Yes, for example, if you go to the golf course, you could build relationships there. Yes, when you're networking, you could build relationships there, and I'll have something to say very specifically about networking within this session. But one of the things that's very unique is that the responsibility for building a firm is actually far more shared than most people realize. And unlike corporate structures, firms, just because of the nature of the partnership or the nature of how business is actually won, it's actually more shared than you imagine. On one hand, there's the things that the marketing department does, but it's not just the marketing department. The IT group is responsible for technology. So all the MarTech stack is one thing that's often not fully understood. HR, that's absolutely huge. Why? Because HR usually owns the training for the firm as a whole, which, by the way, is not just technical or functional training, but it's also business development training. And HR is also responsible for recruiting. If you don't have the best people going into your firm, it's very hard to actually expect that eventually they'll become fully functioning, productive, and top-tier partners. It's also shared not just with respect to the different groups within the firm, but it's also shared between the individuals, the partners, some of the upper year associates, managers, senior managers, but also the firm as well. There's individual responsibility. And the question is, how do we make sure that people grow in terms of their ability to build the business that way? I think that when we talk about thought leadership, sometimes people will say, well, you know what? The firm puts out these publications, the firm does this research and everything. And there's the question of, well, how do we connect the firm's work and investment in the area and the individuals? Sometimes you've got people who've got particular skills with respect to thought leadership. They're exceptionally well respected. They're followed. The thought leadership that they specifically create accrues to them. They're the ones who are out there speaking. They're the ones who are out there in media being spokespeople. They're the ones who've um, people within the industry go to. These are the ones, by the way, that um, distinguish themselves not just as experts in law or accounting, consulting, etc., but as true thought leaders, and people come to them for that particular reason. Relationship building is a little bit different. Um, Relationship building, in my view, there's two things. Obviously, it's how do you strengthen the relationships that you have, and that will drive referrals. And secondly, how do you build new relationships? There's a lot of businesses out there. There's a lot of business out there, and people, people don't care about you. They care about how you're going to solve their problem. But once the table stakes are done, it's the relationship that will get the business, you know? So how do you build that relationship? And I guess a concept that I'd like to share with you is this. Um, the way every single firm competes, every single firm, large, small, whichever the area of your business you've got, they compete on three different dimensions. One is price, one is expertise, and one is trust. And if you sort of turn the volume knob up on each of those three, price is really value. Are you getting value? And oftentimes, your clients will say, "Well, we're going to take this in-house, or we're going to outsource this abroad, or whatever it is." That's the value thing. And there's always somebody else who can do it cheaper, etc. But most firms have no interest in competing on price, on value. Um, Expertise, if you turn that up, it becomes thought leadership. And trust, when you turn that up, that's in the realm of being a trusted advisor. And so the question about about where you find the clients and how you build those relationships is the question of how do you move people up what we call the trust curve? How do you find a way to say, well, it's not just another networking event where we're going to talk about this is for new relationships, where we're just going to talk about the weather, or gee, that was a good speaker, or gee, this is a very fine wine, or hors d'oeuvres, or the weather, or anything else that's just really silly. But how do you actually change that from okay, I'm going to this event to, oh boy, I'm building some relationships. And that's where I want to spend some of my time today. And no, I don't want to talk about this is how you network, but I want to talk about how do you, because most people have an idea of how to network, not sometimes the best practices, but they've got an idea. But how do you actually move people in your firm, whether it be upper year associates, whether it be new partners, whether it be ones, if you're opening a new practice and you don't actually have that much, um, um, you don't have a good referral base in that particular practice, how do you actually get it to stick? Because when you're starting from scratch, or if you're looking for those new zip codes, you can't just one and done, and it's a little bit more competitive. And building relationships, well, of course, everyone by now knows how to do that. Sometimes uh, there's new ways of doing things that might be a little bit better. There might be that one little bit that makes the biggest difference.
Randall, humility aside, you are recognized as a thought leader in the area of thought leadership, and you are a champion of using thought leadership to grow brand and grow business. So, can you talk to us a little bit about how developing thought leadership, the impact on perhaps a larger established organization versus a newer, lesser known organization?
It's pretty important, and I'd say every single firm recognizes that, which is why most firms invest significantly in thought leadership. The question, though, is how do partners and other professionals in the firm actually use it to make a difference? Because yes, there's the list that everything gets sent to. Okay, the marketing department can help with that. Yes, for example, there's um, if a client specifically calls you up and says, "I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on such and such," and if that happens, you know that you're a trusted advisor. Yes, you can say, listen, we've got some thought leadership on that. Let me send it to you, and then we'll have a conversation. Okay, or we can just have a conversation now, follow up with that piece of thought leadership. Okay, but there's a whole bunch of other ways that can be used at an individual level to help amplify. And I think that's really important because you know as much as we would like to think that the brand of the firm is exceptionally important and that's what drives new business, uh, that's table stakes. That gets people in the door. It's the specific relationship that a specific partner or team member has that'll actually bring a specific piece of work in. So how can we use thought leadership in that particular context? How do we, if, for example, a client wants you to put a proposal in because say it's a competitive situation, how do you use thought leadership with the in the context of proposals, or rather the entire pitch process? How do you use it in the context of account-based planning if you're doing that? Where does it fit in with respect to your use of marketing automation and other MarTech um, initiatives that you actually have? It's incredibly important, especially because the investment is just absolutely huge. I'll also say, you can't rest on your laurels in this business. Yes, you've got a relationship. Yes, you've got a reputation, I should say, but it gets stale really quick. The first book I wrote was in 2004. And if I just wrote that one book and did not do anything since then, people would think that there's no more thought leadership coming from Randall Craig and the Brain Trust Professional Institute. Okay, if there's not this continual proof points of it, the brand starts to become a little less strong, a little less relevant. Then all of a sudden, there's some firms out there. Perhaps it's a boutique that's very narrow. Perhaps it's a group of partners that went off to do their own thing. But all of a sudden, the critical mass starts to leach away from the firm. And the opposite is actually true as well. The more you invest in this, to a point, the stronger the firm's brand actually does. But it does not make a difference if the individual firm members do not know how to use it in their own personal business development and relationship building efforts.
Randall, it certainly sounds like the promised land to have everyone on payroll developing their own thought leadership and investing in their IP and having that shine reputation rub off on the greater organization. But in an environment where billable hours is king, how much do we really want business development and IP development to be on the minds of our billable hour staff?
Yeah, of course that's the big thing. Most people outside this world and people looking to get into it have no idea. Basically, there's three jobs in every firm. There's the people who are coming in that are actually doing a lot of the work, and gee, their utilization has got to be super high because that's what they do. There's kind of the manager kind of role, often without that, where you're managing a group of people who are actually doing some of that work, and you're doing some work effort estimation. The client says, how much would this cost if it comes to it, right? And making sure things get done. And sometimes that's done by a partner, but sometimes it's not done by a partner. It's done by. And the third role is the partner role, where business development, relationship building is actually part of the job. And let's face it, in the larger firms, there's some partners who are more attuned to business development, and that's where more of their time gets spent, and others who are very, very focused exclusively on delivery. Just like there's some partners that are focused on management of the firm as opposed to say doing direct client work exclusively, right? So different strokes for different folks, and in medium-sized firms, of course, it's slightly different. And the smallest firms, everyone's got to kind of do everything, otherwise the firm doesn't sort of move forward. But the reason why it's so important, and who it's most important for, is really two groups. Those who are near the point of becoming a partner, because they've been transitioning from that um, billable resource and sometimes manager type role into becoming a partner, which means they've got to build a book of their own business, right? And unless there's some other factor which happens, but they've got to build a certain book of business that's a certain size. Otherwise, they won't be admitted into partnership. So they're very, very keen on understanding how to do business development. And this is the rub, doing it efficiently because of the pressure that you just cited. And the second group is partners. Okay, why? Because kind of that's part of their job, right? To bring in business. And let's face it, there's a number of practices that and there's a number of specific partners where the business is just flowing, it's flowing, it's flowing, and it's just is not going to stop. Um, in an accounting firm, for example, if you're the partner in charge of doing the audit for a large bank, guess what? Every year there's going to be another audit, and your job is to manage this huge, huge book of business because it comes in every single year. With law firms, yes, there are some things that happen on an annual basis, but depending on the practice, you have to continually shake the tree and find more work. And of course, it's coming in because you've built those relationships. Okay, but is it the kind of work that you want? The kind of work, is the competitive world changing? Are GCs wanting to do it differently? Are people looking at outsourcing rather than the old style retainer type arrangements, right? Which were very nice, but so all of a sudden, partners care about this too. I shouldn't say all of a sudden; it's been happening for decades, right? But it's becoming a little bit more interested. In some medium-sized firms, for example, it's a different thing where the older partners are the rainmakers, and the newer partners recognize that they've got to step into that kind of rainmaker kind of role, and it's not as easy. Okay, making that transition either. So they care about it, even though there's a huge pressure on the individual partner to make sure utilization rates are up. And it's not a huge pressure from outside, although of course there is, but it's also this is how you make your money, and it's incredibly important. So
Randall, it is a normal and reasonable and predictable career trajectory for professional service professionals, lawyers, accountants, etc., to grow into leadership roles within the firms where they work, or to leave the mothership, if we can borrow this term from the title of one of your books, to start their own firms. If this is indeed the career path of so many professionals, how come we don't see more professional development on the subject of business growth and business acumen offered by employers, firms, or professional associations? We see a lot of industry specific technical skills learning, but not business leadership skills.
So I would say that most firms are doing that. Okay, most firms recognize the need, and over the last decade or perhaps two, there's been more and more. So, for example, at a partners conference, I couldn't imagine there not be a fair amount of discussion on business development and firm growth strategy and so on. When it comes to sort of new partner training, I couldn't imagine there not ever being a chunk of that specifically on growing your practice, etc. I think that there has, but I think also, particularly, you know, every professional in every firm is got CPD requirements, technical CPD requirements, and I think that these are, this is the mainstay of making sure that you can keep your license, okay, but also that you're up to date, and most firms have got that part figured out and have from day one. The business development training, in the olden days. And I was at one firm for many, 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 many years in a responsible position. Um, it was just assumed that people kind of learned this stuff from osmosis, and then all of a sudden you start to build in some point training, and little bits and pieces. The new manager training, there's a little bit here. The new partner training, there's a chunk here, etc. But I think that I think right now, and by the way, you mentioned some other things, women in business, DEI, there's some of those sort of soft things as well that are dripped out. I can't imagine them not being. But you know, most partners are very keen on okay, let's see about what we can do to grow the business. These are the numbers I'm being evaluated on. These numbers make a difference to my compensation and the comp of all the folks around me. So you know, this is kind of where I need to focus. And so my question is, okay, so how might we actually build in things into a firm that skill up, if you will, individuals on how to do this and actually have it make it stick. You know, I've been brought into to many firms, you know, to do a lunch and learn, and you know, I'll take the money and everything, and I'm glad that they're doing this kind of semi-informal kind of training on whatever it happens to be, or an ask me anything on business development. That's actually a good thing to do. On the other hand, that's just one single point. That's one single point. What's the messages, for example, from the managing partner or the CEO or you know the functional firm leadership, the head of marketing, IT, HR, okay, to the partners, to the firm. What's the message from on top? Okay, what's the behavior that's actually being modeled by these people to sort of demonstrate, okay, alignment? What's the individual train? What's the training that's given to all hands in the firm so people can sort of not magically, aha, now I'm suddenly going to be admitted to the partnership. Suddenly, I figured out this business development thing, and some people do it well and some people don't. And gee, if we just gave them a little bit more rudiments, how do we make sure that if you are going to do business development training, that you do it in a way that'll actually stick. And I'll give you an example actually of that, which is, you know, I've been brought in to do network training. Okay, and very happy to do that. But do you honestly think that if you put people in a room and then you teach them some tactical things on networking, I'm talking not talking about networking for generic, I'm talking about networking to build a business, that when they leave that room, you know, let's call it an hour and a half of time. When they leave that room and they go back to pressures of dealing with client deadlines and all the million other things that you do every day, do you think that they're going to remember, let alone embed those practices into their own business development, you know, activities? Some might, some might, but the only way to activate this learning is to say, well, no, it can't just be one and done. So in this particular case, just as an example, you know, fine. What we'll do is we'll actually go and we'll do that, you know, hour and a half seminar specifically on that, focusing on some very specific practical things. We'll use some of that time to say, okay, how do we actually make this real for you? Recognizing that everyone's a little bit different, right? What are the specific things that you're going to do? And once we've got that down, then it becomes, okay, listen, 2 weeks later, let's have a quick meeting. Okay, it could be a quick Teams or Zoom meeting, or it could be in person, whatever it is. Okay, how did it work? Okay, it builds in a little bit of accountability outside the usual framework, and it also removes some of the questions. 2 weeks later, let's do it again. Let's spend that 10 minutes. It's not going to take long, but at least what it does, it reinforces the learning, right? And then, thank you very much. What else can we do? And this is kind of where I would say, let's go back to how we started this conversation, because in a certain sense, it's not just the question of relationship building, excuse me, and trust building and becoming that trusted advisor, which is kind of the ultimate goal of networking, but also that intersection between trusted advisor and thought leader, and recognizing that there's a number of things that each individual professional can do, whether partner or professional, to sort of work towards that very, very powerful intersection, to become that star, if you will. And so, you know, what we would do is we'd say, hey, listen, we've got a self-paced course. There's 53 different things that you can do to build your thought leadership. I don't know what's best for you, but you do. So here's the pick list. Okay, and gee, here's some micro learning, 2-minute videos on each of these 53 things, along with some action points, if that's what you want to do. And I think we all know what some of those things are. Yeah, speak at conferences, that's one of them. Write somewhere, that's some, like there's a whole bunch of different ones. So fine, let's take those people that have been building the capability of earning trust and becoming more of a trusted advisor, and let's sort of bump up that thought leadership at the individual level. And whether somebody sort of writes their own speech or uses sort of a template created by the marketing department, or whether they're talking about a subject based on, say, a white paper that the firm as a whole did, but they're going to put their spin on it when they're speaking or on podcasts or whatever it happens to be, that's fine. Okay, but fine, they're now doing this self-paced thing as well as actually doing that networking. And then what we would do is we would go back 6 months after we start to the sometimes it's the chief marketing officer, sometimes it's the head of HR, sometimes it's the managing partner or our practice leader, and say, hey, let's talk about what difference this has made. Where are the problems? How can we solve? And the reason why we do that is we recognize that it's not just what's happening at the individual level, but it's also what's the messages and the challenges that are coming from up top. And so this is an example of how you take a particularly simple problem. We just talked about networking and business development in this particular case and say, hey, simple one-offs might have worked many years ago, and you still might want to do them now because there's some value to it. But if you want to make it stick, okay, it involves a little bit more. And I'll also say, going back to what we started on, marketing is in business development is a shared activity. It's from the firm, it's the individual. It's from the marketing department, it's from the HR department, it's from the IT department. All these things have to work together. We don't need perfect, okay, but for the individual partner or more senior associate, excuse me, who's doing some of this business development and learning some of this business development and being effective at being there's got to be the right tools. Tools make it possible, but people make it happen. And they need to be tooled up and they need to have the resources to be able to do it. And they have to be held to account, right? So, it's not enough just to say, okay, for the next year, your goal is to bring in this amount of business or to have this number of billable hours or etc. We need to find a way to along the way give them practical tools to actually do that. And the messaging, whether it's coaching from above or whether it's the self-paced courses or whether it's some of the live interventions, or frankly whether it's doing a presentation at a partners meeting, at a partners conference, or a practice planning retreat, or whatever it is, right? So that everybody is at least on the same page, or at least introduce the same concepts, so that the business development vocabulary isn't something that sits in the marketing department or sits with just a few rainmaker partners, but it becomes something that's more intrinsic to people who are moving up through the ranks, not just, say, the partners. Oh my, this is, sorry for getting on the soapbox, but I think there's some interesting lessons from there, and I think it's very important.
With that, we're going to break here. This part 1 of 3 on business development for firms. We'll pick up with more Q&A in part 2. And if anything we talked about today resonates with you, if you're curious about business growth coaching, about a leadership retreat, how to better align your team, do reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation and share resources. You can email us at info@randallcraig.com or book a call at www.randallcraig.net/30, and we'll see you back for part 2.